Yuji was an elite spy who wanted an ordinary life, so he hid away at an all-girls school. However, everything changes when he discovers all the girls are baddies with daddy issues who would do anything to crack him. When Yuji was younger, his dad treated him like furniture and focused on his little sister, whose paintings helped him live large. However, after she died in a tragic accident, Yuji's dad became an abusive drunk that took his frustration out on their mother, so Yuji was forced to send him back to the lobby to save her. He and his mother planned to escape together, but she never showed up to the train station because she unalived herself. Now, an orphan, he was adopted by a shady man who once did business for his father and was raised to become a terrorist hitman. However, the feds raided the camp, and he was taken in by their leader Asako, who eventually turned him into an ace for the government. One day, after saving a hostage named Chizuru, she insisted on repaying him. This made him realize that he was tired of living a life soaked in blood and secrecy, so he asked if she could help him live a normal life. 2 years later, Chizuru picked him up and took him to her school, but Yuji noted that the school felt like a ghost town. Chizuru revealed that the school had only 6 students, including him, prompting him to ask if the school was another secret government organization. She assured him that it was a normal school and reminded him of his request to experience a normal school life after wasting his youth training in the forest. She made him understand that the school was the closest to normal she could find for a hitman like him, and he agreed to get used to the place. Later, she took him to the student dorm, where he met a girl named Sachi who was dressed in a maid costume. When she was introduced as the class rep, Yuji was shocked and asked why she was dressed like a housemaid. In response, Sachi explained that someone had encouraged her to dress that way since she loved doing everyone's chores for free. Her explanation made him realize that the girl was gullible, but he was polite enough not to point it out. Next, she took him to his room where she revealed that he was the new dorm leader. But Yuji knew she was low-key, turning him into a glorified prison guard. As he observed the place, he noticed how neat the place was, and complimented Sachi for taking her unpaid maid duties seriously. The following morning, he went through his usual routine and tried to mentally prepare himself for his first day as a normal student. His master had always been a perfectionist, and she drilled that into him. She was also a very endowed woman, so he had a hard time dealing with females blessed by the melon goddess and hoped he wouldn't run into one. However, the moment he opened the door, he startled a redhead plot queen named Amane, causing her to fall on her cakes. Before she could question who he was, a younger girl named Makina rushed past them and dove onto the couch. When Amane went after her, Yuji approached them and introduced himself, causing Amane to freeze as though she recognized the name. However, she quickly recovered and encouraged the shy Makina to greet Yuji, and she did so in a nervous tone. Later, when Yuji arrived at school, he didn't see a soul and began wondering if he'd come in too early. Upon getting to class, he stumbled upon a girl named Michiru, practicing her lines in class. She immediately freaked out when she discovered she was being watched, but she managed to regain her composure and rudely demanded to know who he was. As soon as he introduced himself, she began acting like a poorly written tsundere, only to get embarrassed when Bro kept a straight poker face. She tried to distract him from her show of embarrassment by munching on some candies. The moment Yuji decided to play along by asking what she was eating, the lolly yelled at him to mind his business. Yuji told her to can it because her poor acting was painful to watch, adding that her cheaply bleached hair wasn't helping either. Although she kept screaming it was her natural hair, Yuji revealed that he'd spent a lot of time with American blondes to be deceived by her Walmart hair dye. After things settled down, the other girls arrived for class, and so did Chizuru, but the woman noticed that one student was missing. Later in the day, while Sachi was giving Yuji a tour of the school, he asked about Yumeko, the girl who skipped class. Just mentioning her made Sachi suddenly panic, but when he asked what was wrong, she claimed everything was fine and rushed off. Her reaction felt very sus, so Yuji made a mental note to remain on his guard in case Yumiko was a potential threat. He then returned to class to grab his stuff and was surprised to see Yumiko seated at her desk. He decided to introduce himself to her, but the moment he got close, she tried to cut him with a box cutter. Yuji reacted instantly, grabbing her hand mid-swing as if he'd anticipated an attack. As he held her hand, she looked scared, but he calmly told her that it was nice to meet her. When he got to the dorm that evening, he saw that everyone but Yumeko was in. However, he realized that no one was in the lounge and his first assumption was that they were all gooning in their rooms. He decided it'll be best not to disturb their hand exercise and tried opening his room door, only to discover someone broke the tape he set for intruders. At first, he thought it was an enemy, but he realized no pro would miss such an obvious trap. He wanted to startle the intruder, but was met with Amane's giant melons being freed from their carriers. For some reason, the girl didn't try to cover up and spoke to him normally, making him realize that she was also unhinged like the other girls. When he ignored the chance to develop plot and grab a drink, Amane complained that he wasn't a gentleman, so he reminded her that the room was his. After getting dressed, she suddenly asked if he had an older sister, and Yuji answered that he had once had one. When he mentioned his sister's name, Amane's emotions were disrupted once again. However, she recovered quickly and started to tease him, but Yuji was basically a monk, so he didn't fall for her tricks. When she eventually left his room, it dawned on him that didn't have a spare key to his room, so he started wondering how she'd gotten in. At the same time, Amane was standing outside his door with a lockpick in her hand, and she told herself she finally found him. Later that night, Yuji received a call about a new job, so he pulled out his sniper rifle case from under his bed in preparation. Days later, Yumiko tried to jump Yuji in the hallway at school, but he moved out of the way, and she almost fell down. Annoyed, she asked how he'd known to dodge her attack, and Yuji told her that Sukuna had warned him. Still, the girl wasn't about to be discouraged and swore that she would get him soon. In response, Yuji told her that she wouldn't look good in orange. His steady gaze seemed to annoy Yumiko, so she walked off after warning him to watch his back. When he got to class, Amane and Sachi sympathized with him for being Yumiko's target. However, Amane said he dug his own grave by approaching the Ice Queen in the first place. Yuji argued that he couldn't have known that Yumiko was a psycho by just looking at her, but said it didn't matter either way. While they spoke, Amane used her feet to play with Yuji's feet, but he acted like he didn't notice. When Sachi figured out that something was going on, she looked under the table. But Amane had put her feet back in her shoes already. When she straightened up, Amane switched the topic to Yuji's love life. He told them that his master had deemed him unfit for that exercise called love, prompting Sachi to wonder what he needed a master for. Later, during break, Yuji tried to read outside, but the scorching heat made it unbearable. Just as he was about to call it quits, he heard the sound of snoring and turned to find Makina sleeping under a tree. Despite hearing her make sounds, Yuji still checked her pulse. Once he was convinced she was alive, he placed her apple on her chest and sat on the other side of the tree. A few peaceful moments later, Makina woke up, took a bite of her apple, and walked away without noticing Yuji. Seeing how unaware she was of her surroundings, Yuji became curious and decided to follow her. From a distance, he watched Makina feed the fish pond in the garden while talking to herself, and from what he heard, he was convinced the girl was trying to fatten them for consumption. Suddenly, she noticed a crawfish and tried to catch it with a stick. Yuji then approached her to tell her to be careful, but his sudden appearance spooked her, causing her to almost go for a swim. Fortunately, Yuji caught her in time, and because of how light she was, he asked if she ate at all. Embarrassed, Makina asked to be put down, and when he did, she awkwardly thanked him for saving her, and then tried to walk away. However, Yuji stopped her and asked if she remembered his name since she hadn't said it. Makina confirmed that she did, but explained that she didn't feel comfortable addressing him that way. Yuji then told her she was free to call him whatever she wanted, and the girl excitedly called him Ani-chan. After accepting his new title, Yuji helped Makina catch the crawfish in the pond and told her that if she fed it food containing carotene, it would turn blue. Makina was so intrigued by this that she declared that she would give it a try. Before leaving, she thanked Yuji for hanging out with her and gave him her half-eaten apple as a token of appreciation. Meanwhile, Yumiko was on the roof watching Yuji, and she wasn't very happy. She also recalled confronting Chizuru about her decision to let Yuji enroll at the academy. Chizuru assured her that Yuji was harmless, but Yumiko was convinced that Yuji was a degenerate. Because of that, she spent a lot of time and money digging into Yuji's past, but found nothing tangible. This just made her even more suspicious, as she believed no one had a squeaky clean past. Back in the present, she vowed never to accept him as a member of the school and walked away. The next morning, Yumiko attempted to attack Yuji again, but he dodged and kept evading her until she tripped and fell, exposing her peaches. Michiru laughed seeing this, but because she did a poor job of covering her reaction, Yumiko gave her a death glare. Immediately, she looked to the others for help, only to discover that they were all pretending to be doing other things. Once Yumiko walked away, Makina told Chizuru that she was looking forward to her execution, causing the girl to freak out. Later, Yuji dropped by Chizuru's office for a chat, and the lowly woman told him that Yumiko was acting that way towards him because she thought he was sus. Yuji asked what he could do to change Yumiko's opinion, and Chizuru told him to figure it out on his own. She then asked how he was adjusting to school life, and Yuji admitted that even though he was having fun, he still felt like an imposter. Chizuru assured him that he'd get used to things eventually and revealed that, like him, the girls had enrolled at the school for certain reasons. Days later, as Yuji walked to school with Amane and Makina, they spotted a blonde woman outside the school gate. Yuji was prepared to ignore the woman, but when she called out to him, he asked the girls to go ahead without him. This blonde was named Julia, and she was Yuji's handler. She said she had come to see how he was settling into his school life and to warn him not to get his cover blown. Yuji told her that she didn't need to remind him, so she got into her car and drove off, as if auditioning for Fast X, Part 2. When Yuji arrived late to class, Amane asked who Julia was, and he told her she was his superior from his part-time job. Intrigued, Amane asked what his job was about, and he told her that he was a cleaner, purposely omitting what kind of cleaning he did. Unsatisfied, Amane kept asking about Julia, wanting to know if Yuji had a relationship with her outside of work. Yuji told her he wasn't dating Julia, but Amane was convinced, so she asked what he did before transferring to their school. Yuji answered that he was living off his sugar mummy, and when the woman croaked, he became Julia's responsibility, since the two had been friends. Amane couldn't believe he was a shameless bed warmer, but she was relieved that he didn't have an official girlfriend. Later that evening, when Yuji returned to the dorm, Yumiko snuck up on him and tried to stab him again. Yuji quickly caught her hand in a vice grip, forcing her to drop the box cutter. The look in his eyes wasn't friendly, so when he let go of her hand, Yumiko cautiously stepped back. He then picked up the box cutter and told her she was welcome to keep observing him, because he wanted to prove he wasn't her enemy. However, if she discovered that he was indeed a bad guy, she was free to go all Chucky on him. Yumiko was fine with this and promised she would find out what he'd been hiding sooner or later. Another day, when Yuji returned to the dorm from his morning jog, he witnessed Amane breaking into his room. Curious about her motives, he quietly followed her and was shocked to find this girl sniffing his clothes like a creepy stalker. She then moved on to sniffing his sheets, and once she got high in that, she began acting like he was there making plot with her. At that point, Yuji had seen enough, so he made his presence known by walking to the fridge, and Amane became so embarrassed. Later, during school hours, Sachi offered to buy drinks for everyone, and Yuji said he wanted an uncarbonated drink. Because of that, Makina said she wanted uncarbonated milk, but Sachi told her there was no such thing. After Sachi left, Amane pointed out that Makina had been mimicking everything Yuji had said and done over the past few days. Michiru agreed, but said it wasn't unusual, as the girl had always been easily influenced. Amane argued that it wasn't an issue before, since she'd only learned normal things. However, with Yuji, she'd learned to be arrogant and condescending. Yuji seemed proud of this, but he told Makina to watch her tone around the girls, and she agreed. As the group continued chatting, Miss Party Pooper Yumiko reminded Amane and Makina that they had to prepare for the afternoon class. Immediately, after both girls rushed out, Yuji commented on how peaceful it was now that Amane wasn't yapping his ears off. Yumiko told him that Amane used to be very timid and antisocial. However, she changed after surviving a traumatic accident. Yuji was surprised to hear this, but he didn't ask further questions because he knew Yumiko wouldn't say anything. A little while later, Amane and Makina returned, and Amane was surprised to see that Sachi wasn't back yet. When she called her, the class rep revealed that she was at the train station, waiting for the next train to Hokkaido. Apparently, she decided to get fresh milk from Makina and wanted to get it directly from the source. As Amane began telling Sachi to return to school, Yumiko muttered that there wasn't a single normal person in that class. Later, Yuji went outside to read but was distracted by Michiru, who seemed to be making happy sounds. He hid in the bushes to surprise her, only to be surprised when he saw that she was playing with a cat, not a secret lover as he had thought. Michiru explained that the cat had followed her there and wouldn't leave her, no matter how many times she chased it away. Instead of offering a solution, Yuji tried to leave, but Michiru begged him to help her. Unable to resist the cry of a desperate idiot, he told her that cats hated the smell of citrus. Makina immediately revealed that her shampoo was grapefruit scented, so he told her that her hair was her weapon. At his command, Michiru started whipping her hair back and forth, but that didn't work. The cat climbed on her head, thinking she was trying to play with it. Seeing this, Yuji told her that she was on her own and tried to walk away, but then the cat suddenly ran off. Michiru wasn't happy with this, but she pretended to be happy and walked off while singing off-key. The next day, an excited Sachi got Yuji to agree to something, and after she rushed off, Michiru asked if he was sure about his decision. However, he had no idea what she was talking about, as he'd zoned out during the conversation. Just then, Sachi returned to take his measurements, so he asked what she needed it for. Sachi said it was for the shark pouch she was making for him, and then rushed off again. Yuji was shocked, but then he recalled what had led to the conversation in the first place. Michiru's pouch had fallen, and while she was putting her stuff back inside, she realized the zipper was broken. Sachi suddenly appeared beside her at that moment and offered to fix it right away. She then asked Yuji what he thought about the pouch, and he said it was cute before zoning out. So, when Sachi asked if he would like to have one, he said yes without realizing it. Back in the present, Yuji freaked out and called out to Sachi, hoping to cancel his request. When she appeared, Yuji realized he would hurt her feelings if he told the truth, so he asked her to make a mad dog pouch instead. Sachi happily accepted the order change and then rushed off, leaving Yuji to bang on the wall while cursing his gentlemanly ways. He was still doing that when Makina turned the corner, so she asked what the problem was. Makiru tried to explain the situation, but Sachi returned just then with a completed pouch. Yuji looked like he was about to pass out from embarrassment, so Makiru grabbed the pouch and asked Makina if she liked it. The young girl was instantly fascinated by the stones Sachi used to design the pouch, so Yuji asked Sachi to let Makina have it. Sachi agreed and began showing the excited Makina what to push to get the dog to bark. After they walked away, Yuji thanked Michiru for saving his social image and promised to repay her. Later in the day, during sports period, Amane sprained her ankle, so Yuji took her to the infirmary. When he finished treating her, he tried to leave, but she clung to his waist, begging him to stay. Fed up with her behavior, he asked what she wanted and she said she wanted him to be her boyfriend. Yuji refused without a second thought, but Amane wasn't deterred and asked if she could be his big sister instead. When he tried to refuse again, she guilt-tripped him into changing his mind. The next day, during lunch, Amane and Makina brought a big bento to share with Yuji. He tried to refuse it, but Amane was insistent, so he gave in and let her feed him the first bite. As he chewed on the food, he couldn't help but feel a sense of calm since it was the first time he felt like he belonged somewhere since his master, whom he had been living with, died. A few days later, as Yuji jogged back to the dorm, he spotted Michiru standing on the cliff by the lighthouse. Curious, he approached her, and she told him she was there admiring the sea because it made her feel her problems were small. When she started getting all philosophical, the cat she'd been with the other day walked up to her, leading Yuji to believe that she'd come up there because of it, but she denied it. Eventually, they sat together, and Michiru suddenly started talking about death and told Yuji that she wanted him to bury her on that cliff if she died. Yuji couldn't help but think there was something wrong with Michiru, and it kept bugging him even to the next day. However, he forgot all about the problem when he noticed Michiru drinking a vitamin C drink. Michiru claimed vitamin C made people smart and said she wouldn't give Yuji any because she needed all the brain power she could get. After she ran off, Yuji thought to himself that the girl's dumbness came pre-installed. Later that day, while everyone except Michiru was hanging out in the lounge, Makina told Yuji that she believed Michiru had been body snatched. That's because one moment she acted like an airhead with few functioning brain cells, and the next, she was all smart and serious. The other girls confirmed what Makina said, and as Makina was trying to explain further, lightning struck outside, startling Yumeko. The next day, when Yuji returned to the dorm, Amane, Sachi, and Makina approached him, and Amane asked for a favor. Yuji told her he couldn't help her at the moment and began walking to his room. Just then, Yumiko came downstairs and told the group that she was going out, but the girls insisted that she answer a question first. They wanted to know if she thought that men and women couldn't be casual friends, and Yumiko said she didn't have an answer. After she left, Michiru walked in, so they asked her the same question. Suddenly, she handed her bag to Sachi and rushed off, ignoring Makina, who was calling out to her. Michiru's behavior made everyone worried, so Yuji went after her. He found her hunched over the fountain in the school garden, but she lashed out at him and walked away. For some reason, Yuji felt like he shouldn't leave her alone. He tracked her to the cliff, and the moment she turned, Yuji sensed something was off about her. He easily confirmed it when she said something smart, so he asked who she was. Michiru, or rather, Michiru too, told him not to worry and then started talking about death. Yuji couldn't understand why she was being that way, and the girl before him kept speaking in riddles. After the cat in her lap ran off, Yuji tried to leave, but Michiru told him to wait and asked if he'd ever had a girlfriend before. Yuji told her relationships weren't his thing, so she asked if he'd ever kissed anyone, and he said yes. Intrigued, she asked if she could kiss him to find out what kissing felt like, and Yuji agreed. However, he did look shocked when she actually planted her lips on his. When she pulled away, she told him she still didn't understand the hype around kissing. Yuji tried to ask what her endgame was, but she cut him off, saying she would see him later, which confused him. The next moment, the real Michiru regained control and freaked out at how close Yuji was to her. This caused her to accidentally trip and touch dog poop, so she started screaming at the dog and its owner. When she finished, she wiped her hand clean, and Yuji welcomed her back, making Michiru wonder if the heat was affecting his brain. However, she suddenly got serious and asked if she'd said anything weird to him. Yuji reminded her that she was the queen of weird and started walking away, so she followed him and began cursing him out. The next day in school, Yuji observed Michiru as she bugged Yumiko and wondered if she was aware of her split personality. After Yumiko flicked Michiru's forehead and walked away, Michiru approached Yuji, but he told her that he had somewhere to be. As he began walking away, she followed him, asking why he was avoiding her. When Yuji refused to respond, she blocked his path and demanded an answer, so he told her that she had osculated him. Seeing as she was as dumb as Luffy, Michiru had no idea what that word meant, but she pretended to, and asked him to show her how she'd osculated him. Yuji asked if she was sure she wanted him to reenact what happened, and Michiru confirmed that she was. However, the moment he moved to kiss her, she freaked out and ran away screaming. She didn't stop until she got to the courtyard, and while she was reeling from what almost happened, the stray cat walked up to her. Michiru wasn't in the mood to play, so she shooed it away. However, she regretted it at the last moment and tried calling it back. Sadly, it ignored her, so she started searching for it to give it treats as a token of her apology. When Yuji came out and saw her, he offered to help her, but they couldn't find it even after going to the cliff. Yuji assured Michiru that the cat would return when it felt like it, and as they began walking to the dorm, something caught his attention. Yuji asked Michiru to go ahead without him, and when he checked out, he discovered it was the cat. Someone had run it over and left it to die, and unfortunately, Michiru saw it because she followed Yuji. When she started panicking, Yuji tried to calm her down, but the girl wasn't listening to him. Left with no choice, he ran into the middle of the road and forced a taxi to stop. Sadly, the cat died on their way to the hospital and Michiru cried. That night, when Yuji went to check on Michiru in her room, he discovered that she'd overdosed on pills. He then rushed her to the infirmary, and Chizuru assured him that she would be fine. The following morning, when Yuji opened his door, he found Michiru waiting for him, so she asked how she was feeling. Michiru assured him that she was doing okay and even started doing her weird poses to prove it. Just then, Sachi arrived and asked how she was doing. Since Yuji had told them that Michiru was down with a cold, Michiru repeated what she'd told Yuji, and Sachi said she was relieved to hear that. Amane and Makina soon joined the trio, and Makina started begging Yuji to play shadow tag with her. Yuji barely spared Makina a glance before returning his attention to Michiru, who was speaking to Sachi. Later in the day, Yuji met Michiru on the roof and told her that he knew she was Michiru B. When he asked where the real Michiru was, she told him that she was gone forever and walked away. That evening, Sachi came to Yuji with a box which Michiru had given her. She said Michiru had instructed her not to return the box to her under any circumstances and that she didn't know what was inside. When she attempted to saw the box open earlier, she realized she was overstepping her boundaries and decided to bring it to him. Understanding her dilemma, Yuji promised to hold on to the book. However, after Sachi left, he picked the lock and was surprised by what he saw inside the box. Later on, he went to see Michiru B and showed her the diary, which had been inside the box. It turned out that Michiru had been aware of her second personality, as she gained it after undergoing a heart transplant. Seeing no need to pretend, Michiru B revealed that she'd tried to convince Michiru to retake control of her body, but she'd refused. The cat's death hurt her deeply, so she believed that if she remained in the abyss, she would never lose another loved one. After listening to what Michiru B had to say, Yuji asked if she was willing to let Michiru return, and she said she was. Satisfied with her answer, he pulled out Michiru's candy pack from his pocket. It turned out they were actually pills and she'd been taking it to keep Michiru B in check. He believed that if Michiru B took it, the real Michiru would return. Michiru B tried to refuse, but Yuji forced her to take the pills and pinned her down on her bed to prevent her from hurting herself. A few seconds later, the real Michiru returned, so Yuji asked what she wanted. Michiru started crying and told him she didn't want to keep living in a world where she could lose the ones she cared about at any moment. When she finished speaking, she passed out, so Yuji promised to help her die. Later, when Michiru woke up, she discovered she couldn't move and was locked inside a coffin. Yuji, who was standing outside, revealed that he'd injected her with a heavy dose of muscle relaxant. However, he assured her that it would wear off soon. The only problem would be that she wouldn't be able to get out, as he was going to bury her alive in her resting place of choice. As he began shoveling dirt onto the coffin, Michiru recalled her past when she went to the rooftop at her school and found a girl about to jump, so she screamed at her. The girl quickly grabbed onto the railing and looked at Michiru in confusion as she'd started crying. Eventually, both girls sat next to each other on the other side of the railing, and once Michiru wiped her tears away, she told the other girl her name, and they laughed. After that day, the girls became besties and did everything together. Unfortunately, the other girl still jumped to her death sometime later, and the shock caused Michiru to have a heart attack. As a result, she was flown to the United States for an emergency heart transplant. However, Michiru never got used to her new heart, and things only got worse when she started hearing the voice of her donor in her head. Unable to stand the torture anymore, she tried to end her life and was sent to a rehabilitation clinic. One day, she fell during therapy, and other patients laughed. However, instead of getting angry, Michiru decided to become their unofficial jester. From there, she graduated to being a fake tsundere and adjusting herself to fit into the role of someone whom everyone liked. Suddenly, that memory faded, and she found herself in an abyss with her dead friend. The girl's face was scratched off, almost as if Michiru didn't want to remember how she looked in her final moments. As they stood staring at each other, the girl asked Michiru to come with her, but Michiru refused. She said the girl had been dead for a long time, and even though she loved her, she couldn't be with her as it wasn't her time yet. As soon as the words left Michiru's mouth, the girl disappeared, leaving behind her shoes and a photo collage of herself and Michiru. Instead of taking the items, Michiru turned to leave, and when the cat's spirit appeared again, it seemed happy. Michiru apologized for leaving it alone, but said she was finally going to focus on her future. She then opened a door and found herself back inside the coffin. Using what little strength she had, Michiru forced the coffin open and began trying to crawl out of her grave in the pouring rain. Fortunately, Yuji was there to help her, and she revealed that Michiru had spent 3 days inside that coffin. Michiru was surprised, but mostly by the fact that Yuji had spent those 3 days waiting for her. He told her it was because he knew she didn't really want to die and would eventually overcome her mental block. As he began walking away, Michiru called out to him, asking if she was truly alive. Once Yuji confirmed that she was, she leapt onto his back and thanked him for saving her. Days later, Yuji took Michiru B to her family's house in the United States because it was what the real Michiru wanted. While Michiru B spoke to her family, Yuji called Julia and thanked her for helping her locate Michiru B's family. As soon as he got off the phone, Michiru B rushed into his arms and thanked him for giving her that priceless gift. Days later, Julia was instructed by her superior to order Yuji to convince Yumiko to return to her family. Julia vehemently refused, saying Yuji wasn't a therapist or guidance counselor. However, when the supervisor threatened to send people to scare Yumiko into returning, she reconsidered. That same week, while Yuji and the other girls were playing Monopoly, Yumiko walked out of the dorm without saying a word to them. Almost immediately, Yuji put down his cards and followed her, prompting Makina to say he'd been following Yumiko around like a lost puppy. Amane didn't seem to like this, so she told Makina they were going shopping, which made the young girl happy. Meanwhile, Yuji didn't hide the fact that he was tailing Yumiko, so the girl asked if he'd suddenly fallen in love with her. Yuji ignored the question and told her to pretend like he wasn't there, but Yumiko pointed out that his emo energy wasn't something one could ignore. It turned out that instead of ordering Yuji to convince Yumiko to go home, Julia had instructed him to act as her bodyguard, which was why he was currently standing behind her while she drew by the riverbank. When he complimented her drawing, Yumiko told him to shove his opinion where the sun doesn't shine. Just then, it started raining, so Yumiko tried to make a run for it, but she tripped and spilt the contents of her bag. While they were picking up the items, some men in suits surrounded them and told Yumiko to come with them. Terrified, Yumiko hid behind Yuji, and when one of the men touched Yuji's shoulder, Yuji taught him the meaning of personal space. Seeing this, the other men tried to attack, but Yuji effortlessly beat them up and ran away with Yumiko. However, because the rain was heavy, they sought refuge under a bridge. While they waited for the rain to subside, Thor flexed his powers, scaring Yumiko into Yuji's arms. As she trembled with fear, she started telling him about how her father had married her mother because he wanted a son. However, he got a daughter instead, and since her mother's body was naturally frail, she couldn't get pregnant again. Ultimately, the woman fell seriously ill and was confined to a hospital. Yumiko visited her every day, but one fateful day, the woman told her that things would have been better if she had been a boy. Hurt, Yumiko ran out of the hospital and didn't stop running until her legs gave out. As she cried, she lamented her misfortune, saying she hadn't asked to be born. In the heat of the moment, she spotted her box cutter and, without a second thought, she grabbed it and cut off her hair. Sometime after that, her father's mistress gave birth to a boy, and when Yumiko's mother heard about it, the woman discontinued her living subscription. However, the new heir soon fell ill and died, so her father decided it was time he started training her to take over his company. This led people to start talking about her negatively, which forced her to become more closed off. One day, she cut her classmate after overhearing the girl mocking her, and when her father learned of it, he opened a new school to hide her away. When she finished telling her story, she apologized to Yuji for trauma dumping on him. He told her that he didn't really care, and then left because it had stopped raining. Later, the bodyguards reported what Yuji did to them to Yumiko's father, and the man became livid. Immediately, he called Chizuru and demanded that she expel Yuji, but she refused, which pissed him off even more. So, he declared that he'd send Yumiko abroad and shut down the school. When Yumiko heard about it, she stormed out of Chizuru's office and went to lock herself up in her dorm room. When the others started begging her to open up, her father pulled up at the dorm with his men and demanded that Yumiko come with him. Yuji immediately went out to speak to the man, and he told him that he wouldn't let him take Yumiko away. Chizuru wasn't too far behind, and when she tried to do some damage control, Yumiko's old man cut her off and started complaining. Annoyed, Michiru told him to put a pin in it and leave the premises, prompting the man to ask Chizuru if she was raising hooligans. Just then, Yumiko emerged from the building and told her dad that she would choose the so-called hooligans over him any day. Upon seeing her, Yumiko's father ordered his men to seize her, but Yumiko suddenly pulled out a gun and shot at them, shocking everyone. She promised her father that the next bullet would be buried in someone if he and his men didn't back off, so he was forced to call in reinforcements. Yumiko then barricaded herself and the others inside the dorm, refusing to give in to her father's demands. When she fired another shot at them, Her father called out to her, saying everything he'd done was for her. Yumiko argued that he'd never cared about her or her mother, so he got pissed and started approaching her. Yumiko told him to stay back, but he didn't listen, so she shot him in the shoulder. When she tried to shoot again, she discovered that she was out of bullets. Immediately, Julia ordered her men to move in and disarm Yumiko. Unfazed, Yumiko pulled out a grenade and, with tears in her eyes, told her father to continue living like she never existed. After the grenade exploded, Yumiko's father rushed inside the dorm, hoping and praying that Yumiko was fine, but what he found was her lifeless body. As he began screaming and crying, Julia ordered his men to take him to the hospital. Days later, Yuji went to speak to Yumiko's father at her grave and asked why he had left the school open. In response, the man showed him the letter Yumiko left behind, asking her father to keep the school open even if she did. He said that was the first and last thing Yumiko ever asked of him, so he couldn't refuse it since he'd already failed her as a father. Before leaving, he thanked Yumiko for being his daughter and said he was proud of her. Unknown to him, Yumiko was hiding behind a tree, and she had heard everything he said. Later, Yuji went to see Julia, and it was revealed that Yuji was the one who came up with the fake death plan. That day, under the bridge, he'd noticed that Yumiko's father's men were still watching them, so he secretly showed Yumiko a note in which he promised to help her. The gun she used against her father had one real bullet, which Yumiko had fired as a warning shot. The bullet which hit her father had been fired by Yuji's sniper rifle, and the body everyone saw after the explosion had been a fake. Back in the present, Julian said they had retrieved all the camera footage in the area, so no one would find anything if they checked. She then handed Yumiko her new family registration form and warned her to lie low for a bit. The next day, Yumiko went to the riverbank to draw again, and even though he didn't have to, Yuji followed her. As she worked, he told her that she looked different, and Yumiko just smiled in gratitude. The following week, while Makina and Sachi were watching television, Makina told Sachi they should try counting to 10,000 inches the tub because the presenter had mentioned something similar. Surprisingly, Sachi took her words literally and sat in the tub counting until she passed out. Fortunately, the others found her and took care of her in her room. Makina couldn't help but feel guilty about what happened, so Amane warned her not to suggest things to Sachi, as the girl was stupid enough to try it. When the girls stepped out to get something, Yuji heard Sachi mutter something in her sleep and became shocked. So the next day, while Sachi was thanking the girls for taking care of her, he was out verifying his suspicions. Later in the day, Chizuru left the girls to study for their tests, but Michiru, who had vowed to remain dumb, started complaining. She even went so far as to ask Sachi to make the tests disappear, earning herself a slap on the head from Amane. The latter warned her to stop saying stupid things, but to everyone's surprise, Sachi promised that she would fulfill Michiru's request. After school, Amane knocked on Sachi's door, but Sachi didn't answer, which worried her. Before she could figure out what to do, Yuji returned, so she sat with him in the lounge and explained everything. Yuji said that everyone knew Michiru's mouth and brain were disconnected, so taking her words seriously was out of the question. Amane agreed, but reminded Yuji about the tub incident. Yuji then promised to speak to Sachi, and Yumiko said that was one of the smartest decisions he'd ever made. After that, the girls decided to retire for the night, but Yumiko stopped on the stairs to speak to Yuji about a rumor she'd heard. Apparently, a girl had set her school on fire to stop a test from taking place, and she wanted to know if he thought Sachi would go that far. Yuji told her that Sachi was a smart girl. However, if she made drastic decisions, he would handle the situation. Later that night, after everyone went to bed, Sachi stood in front of her closet, telling herself that she had to be a good girl. However, she still snuck out of the dorm and went to school to take measurements. In the days that followed, everyone studied for tests, but Yuji kept his eyes on Sachi. Rightly so, because the girl was going all Walter White in her room each night. The day before the test, she didn't show up to class, causing Amane and Makina to worry. That night, Sachi snuck into school and placed her homemade bombs in strategic places. When she finished, she set off the timer, but was surprised and quickly hid the controller when the other girls walked in. They told her that Yuji had asked them to come there and wondered what he needed them for. Sachi immediately tried to deactivate her bombs, but the control didn't work, and that was when her panic set in. She nervously suggested to the others that they return to the dorm, but the girls refused, saying they had to wait for Yuji. Michiru even rested her leg on the desk, where Sachi had hidden a bomb, and Sachi's demeanor changed. She desperately tried to convince the girls to leave, prompting Yumiko to ask if she was hiding something. Sachi denied it, but when Amane approached her, she smacked her hand away and pushed her. Seeing this, the others started asking if she was feeling okay, but Sachi didn't respond and kept insisting that they all get out. When Michiru tried to get off the desk she was sitting on, the clumsy girl accidentally kicked the one containing the bomb down and somehow ended up falling a few other desks before hitting her head against the board. Her little accident allowed Sachi to hide the bomb with her body, but she kept screaming at the other to leave because the bombs were about to explode. Surprisingly, they didn't, and the next moment, Yuji walked into the classroom. He thanked the girls for coming to his impromptu meeting, but then asked them to return to the dorms, saying he would follow shortly after he cleaned up with Sachi. Michiru immediately started complaining, saying Yuji wanted to be alone with Sachi so he could do naughty things with her. But Yumiko told her to shut up. After the girls left, Yuji revealed to Sachi that he had tampered with the bombs. The girl was so shocked and relieved that she peed herself, so he gave her some privacy to change. Once he was finished, he told her that he'd been to her hometown, and Sachi asked if he had finally remembered her. It turned out that when she was younger, her parents never had time for her, so she spent her time in the playground. One day, she met Yuji and the two bonded over their loneliness. However, as time went by, Yuji stopped visiting the park. On her birthday, her parents told her that they had taken time off work to spend the day with her, but Sachi got mad. She felt it was unfair of them to try to make things up to her like that and rushed out of the house. It wasn't until after she sat in the playground for hours that she realized how unreasonable she was being. Just as she decided to return home, she heard her parents calling out to her, so she rushed to meet them. Unfortunately, they got run over by a truck right before her eyes, and the shock caused her to faint. Her mother fell into a coma, but her father didn't make it. Back in the present, Sachi blamed herself for what happened to her parents and said it was why she had vowed to always do as she'd been told. Yuji told her that there was nothing wrong with being selfish sometimes, as it was her selfishness that helped him forget his troubles for a little while. He also told her that her parents didn't think she was being selfish and asked her not to be too hard on herself. Overwhelmed, Sachi started crying, and when she hugged Yuji, he gave her the comfort she sought. Later on, they gathered the bombs in the courtyard and detonated them, but to cover up the explosion, Yuji set off fireworks. The next day, Yuji took Sachi to her parents' factory, and she was surprised to see the wall decorated with things for her birthday. Her parents had planned to take her there that day, but because of the accident, they never did. After reading the letter they wrote to her, Sachi broke down into tears, but this time around it wasn't tears of sadness. Later, on their way back to the dorm, Sachi told Yuji that she would try to visit her mother more often. She then asked him to hug her, and he did because he was a nice guy. Days later, Yuji confronted Makina in the school garden after the girl had emailed him asking him to be her father. Makina assured him that she had been of sound mind when she wrote the email and then officially made the request. Later in the day, when they returned to the dorm, he informed the girls that he was now Makina's father, prompting Michiru to ask who Yuji's pot dealer was. On the other hand, Amane assumed they were playing a game, but Makina assured her they weren't. Yuji also confirmed it and told Makina that he would do his best to raise her into a fine adult one day. He then left to inform Julia, and the woman was just as shocked as the girls had been a few moments earlier. Yuji explained that he couldn't turn down Makina's request because she had offered him 70 million. After hearing this, Julia said she wasn't surprised as Makina came from a long line of politicians. Sadly, her father had passed away a few years ago in an accident, or so the story went. This statement made Yuji realize that there was more to Makina's family, so she asked Julia to send him all the files she had on the man's death. Julia told him that the files were classified, but Yuji pleaded with her to make it happen either way. The next day, Yuji sat in Chizuru's office reviewing the files Julia had sent on Makina's family. Chizuru told him that Makina's grandmother held all the power in the family and that Makina's father had married into it. However, he didn't know that they had a long history of corruption, and once he found out, he tried to expose them. Unfortunately, he died in a supposed accident before he could reveal the truth. That accident had occurred around the time Makina was kidnapped, and after she was rescued, she developed aphasia due to a mental illness. Thanks to that, her family threw her away like yesterday's garbage and named her little sister the new heir. After leaving Chizuru, Yuji went to join the girls who were outside gardening, and Makina rushed over to tell him about the apple tree just planted. A few hours later, Chizuru rounded up the last class for the semester, and as soon as they got outside, Makina began celebrating her freedom. However, Yuji rained on her parade by reminding her that she had agreed to train and study with him. Mane told him to cut her some slack, but Yuji said that no daughter of his would ever become another Sakura. The seriousness in his words made Michiru call him a dictator, but Yuji ignored her. The very next day, he started Makina's training, and even though the girl was skilled, she still wasn't a match for Yuji. Sometime in the afternoon, Amane asked Yumeko if she'd seen the father-daughter duo, and Yumeko said she hadn't. However, she told Amane that Yuji had used her computer to order some stuff. At that time, Yuji was teaching Makina to be a sniper, for reasons best known to him. The first shot she took missed its target, so he instructed her on what to do, and she hit the target on her next shot. Just then, Yumiko arrived, so Yuji went to scold her for walking into his shooting range. Apparently, he put up red flags to indicate that it was in no walking zone. but Yumiko asked how she was supposed to know that. They then started arguing, and Yumiko demanded to know what crazy thing he was teaching Makina to do. At this, he brought Makina and the rifle, and Yumiko realized that he'd ordered the rifle using her computer. When he asked if she wanted to give it a go, Yumiko told him that she preferred intellectual games. This made Makina say she was a boring old hag, so Yumiko pulled on her cheeks to show her that old hags were also wicked. A few days later, Yuji and Makina dropped Amane off at the train station because the girl was going home for the summer. Before leaving, Amane gave Makina the big sister speech, and Makina promised to behave. Later in the day, Makina grew bored with her assignments and asked Yuji if he had any plans to travel. Yuji said he was thinking of going to his master's place to clean up, so Makina suggested that they head there immediately. She then rushed off to make lunch, and Yuji decided it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring the girl along. Eventually, they got on Amane's bike, and as they rode to their destination, Makina asked Yuji about his master. He said she'd taken him in because his foster father had been a bad man, and as the years flew by, she taught him how to survive on his own. Shortly after Yuji concluded his story, they arrived at his master's place, so they cleaned it up before Yuji took Makina with him to pay respect to his master. Since it was late, they spent the night at the cabin, and Yuji called Julia to let her know. A few days later, Makina was on her way back from the store when she spotted her sister, Serena, in the streets. Serena's father was different from Makina's father, and Makina only found out about her by chance. However, she liked the idea of having a little sister, so she always snuck out to see her. Sadly, it was during one of those unauthorized visits that Makina got kidnapped. Now, Makina could only walk past her because the girl still didn't know about her existence. Serena then got into the car, but the moment her driver turned the ignition, the car exploded, sending Makina flying. Later at the dorm, Sachi came out of Makina's room after tending to her and informed Yuji that she was doing fine. When he went in, he found Yumiko sitting by her bed and asked if they could swap places. Yumiko agreed, but before leaving, she told Yuji that her sources had confirmed that Serena, not Makina, was the main target. As Yuji sat by the bed, Makina woke up and asked about her sister. He told her that Serena had been taken to the hospital and promised that she was doing fine. Makina then asked Yuji if he would ever leave her, and he assured her that he wouldn't, so she started crying from relief. After she fell asleep again, Yuji left the room, but at that moment, he got a text from Julia asking him to report to headquarters. When he arrived, she handed him his new mission details, and Yuji was shocked to discover that Makina was the target. Hours later, Julia and the rest of her team began trying to locate Yuji. It turned out that after Julia handed the mission file to Yuji, he pretended to accept it. However, the very next morning, he had Makina pack up her things and vaguely explain to the girls that Makina was in danger. The girls didn't push him to give them details, but they wished him and Makina well. Sachi even gave Makina the apple tree she had planted at school the other day and told her to make sure she returned it. As they began walking away, Yuji asked Makina if she understood the implication of what was happening. Makina told him not to mistake her for SpongeBob and assured him that she knew her life was on the line. However, she said she didn't mind as long as people remembered her in a good light. The only thing she was sad about was that she never got to say goodbye to Yumiko. Yuji then asked her to look at the school's rooftop, and when she did, she spotted Yumiko watching them, which made her excited. Soon, they arrived in town, but Yuji spotted Julia's car parked nearby, so he asked Makina to wait for him in a bookstore. He then went to stand near the car to casually get Julia's attention. The woman asked if he was truly going to go against the organization, and Yuji confirmed that he was. Julia pointed out that it didn't matter whether he went through with the job, because Makina's family would keep coming after her. Curious, he asked why her own family wanted her dead after they cast her away when she needed them the most. Julia explained that Makina had been born with a photogenic memory, and before she was kidnapped, she accidentally found and read the journals her father had stolen to expose her mother. After she became ill, they decided it didn't matter anymore. However, after what happened to her sister the previous day, Makina had called her mother to threaten her. Instead of resolving the issue, the woman decided to get rid of her own daughter, as she'd done with her husband. After Julia finished speaking, Yuji said that all the evil stepmothers in Disney ought to take lessons from Makina's mother. He also vowed to protect Makina with his life and told Julia she was free to come after him. With that said, Julia sped off, and Yuji muttered an apology to her. The following morning, while Yuji and Makina were having breakfast, their next-door neighbors were exercising really loudly, and innocent Makina started banging on the wall to tell them to keep it down. Yuji advised her to stop unless she wanted to be traumatized for life, so Makina listened. She then asked what he was working on, and he told her it was a special toy. Later, Julia's people intercepted an outgoing call from Yuji, but Julia figured he was trying to judge their reaction speed. Not surprisingly, she was right. When the agents arrived at the location, Yuji was elsewhere, watching them. After they left, he came out of hiding and returned to the hideout, purposely ignoring the agent who had stayed behind to watch out for him. That night, an entire squad was deployed to the place, and all the other residents were evacuated. Unknown to them, Yuji and Makina were hiding inside the freezer, waiting for the right chance to escape. When the squad arrived at their room, they found that Yuji had hooked up a homemade bomb to the door. Once they deactivated it, they opened the door and were hit with a powerful gas. Fortunately, they came prepared with gas masks, so they walked in without any issue, only to realize that they had been fooled. As they began looking around, they spotted a toy hanging from the ceiling, but before Julia could warn them, the toy exploded. During the chaos that followed, Yuji and Makina pretended to be agents and stole one of their vans. The van didn't have a tracker, so Julia's people couldn't track it. Eventually, Yuji and Makina arrived at an underground parking lot. Just as they were about to ditch the van, Makina realized that she'd forgotten her plant at the old hideout. She pleaded with Yuji to go back and get it, but he told her it was too risky. When she kept insisting, he promised to steal it back from the evidence room when he had the chance. Meanwhile, Julia received word that Yuji and Makina had disappeared without a trace, leaving only the plant behind. The secretary also gave her a note from someone called the professor, who instructed them to return the plant to where they had taken it. The secretary didn't understand why they needed to do that, but Julia said the professor had never given them wrong advice before. A little while later, Yuji disarmed the agent who found him, and when he returned to the new hideout, he discovered that Makina was gone. She had returned to pick up her plant but was ambushed by the organization. She managed to overpower the first guy, but his partner shot her and then began kicking her because he was a terrible person. Makina just lay there, crying for Yuji, when the next moment she heard his voice. He assured her that she wouldn't die, and then beat up her attackers. When he finally reached her, Makina told him she was cold, so he told her to hold on until they reached the hospital. On his way out of the building, he ran into Julia, who had just arrived, and she demanded that he hand Makina over. Yuji initially refused, but Julia made him realize that she was Makina's best hope for survival. Hours later, Makina lay in a hospital bed while her mother tried to coax her awake. When she didn't respond, the cruel woman asked Julia if Makina's organs were all intact. Julia confirmed that they were, so the woman told her that Makina would be an organ donor for Serena, who was still in a critical condition. That night, Yuji snuck into Makina's mother's office, isekai'd her without a second thought, then walked away as if he had nothing to do with it. Surprisingly, when the news broke, it was reported that the assassin had taken his own life. Julia then told her secretary that they brokered a deal with Makina's family after Makina provided them with the information from the ledger. Yuji was also cleared of all charges by the organization, so Julia dropped him off at the hospital. Makina was very happy to be reunited with him, and when they returned to school, the girls welcomed them with smiles. Days later, Julia drove Yuji back to school in the middle of the night and kissed his cheek before he got out of the car. Once she sped off, Yuji turned to go in and found a shocked Sachi staring at him. After clearing things up with her, he went to the dorm and found that Amane had made herself comfortable by ironing his clothes. Yuji thanked her for her help and said she could leave because he wanted to take a bath, but she refused, saying she would make him dinner. This made him ask why she was clinging to him like a desperate housewife, and Amane told him that it was because she was hopelessly in love with him. Of course, Yuji didn't believe that Cupid had wasted his arrows on a cultured girl like Amane, but Amane swore that she had no ulterior motives. After his bath, she served him dinner, and while he was eating, she received an email from Sachi. Attached to it was a photo of Julia kissing Yuji on the cheek, so Amane demanded to know why he was hoeing around. Yuji reminded her that Julia was his boss, and Amane cooled down almost immediately, which surprised him. However, she teased him, saying she would forgive his indiscretion if he kissed her, so he did. The kiss lasted for a few seconds, and when he pulled away, Amane shyly revealed to Yuji that it was her first. Yuji tried to sound relatable, telling her it was the same for him, but Amane called him a liar. Yuji then apologized, admitted he'd kissed her because he wanted to, and told her he would accept her love for him. In other words, she could become his girlfriend, but he wouldn't be her boyfriend. He said Amane was free to turn down his proposal, but if she accepted, she had to meet two conditions. First, if he suddenly disappeared, she wouldn't cry for him, and secondly, she had to forget him within a year. Amane thought it over for a few seconds, then told Yuji she accepted his conditions. However, she asked if he had any feelings for her. Yuji admitted that he felt something for her, but as someone who didn't understand emotions, he didn't know what to call those feelings. Amane felt so relieved hearing his answer that she fell to her knees and didn't get up again. Yuji just watched her go through all the emotions, and when he tried to help her up, she asked if he wanted to consummate the relationship. She said this with a straight face, but her hands were shaking, so Yuji hit her head and told her to stop acting tough. He then crouched down to her level and asked her to tell him the truth about why she'd been so desperate to get with him. Amane gave her usual love at first sight story, but suddenly she started crying and had to come clean. She said that from the moment she met him, she knew who he was because his sister Kazuki had been in the same accident as she was. Shocked, Yuji asked why she hadn't told him before, and Amane admitted it was because she was afraid. She then got up and told him she needed to show him something. A few moments later, she returned with her old diary, where she'd written the events that transpired. They had been returning from a camping trip when their bus tires got punctured, and the bus rolled off a cliff. When Amane regained consciousness, she was lying on top of Kazuki, and the girl wasn't too happy being her human cushion. Amane kept apologizing for the inconvenience, but Kazuki told her that if she didn't stop, she would smack her into silence. The two then managed to get off the bus, and Kazuki asked Amane who she wanted to save first amongst the group. Amane said she couldn't decide, so Kazuki said they should help the team captain first because she hated her. That reason confused Amane, so Kazuki explained that if she saved her enemy first, she wouldn't have to worry about her again. Sometime later, the girls successfully helped the survivors out of the bus, but some of the girls were injured, and their teacher was still unconscious. Kazuki then asked the team captain what they should do because sitting around and waiting for help was out of the question. The girl said she didn't know, but the moment Kazuki offered to take charge, the captain got pissed. She said if something went wrong after Kazuki made a decision, she would be the one to answer for it. So Kazuki told her to stop stalling and act like a leader. Annoyed, she walked off and ordered one of the girls to administer first aid to everyone. The girl argued that she didn't know how, but the team captain insisted that she do it. Just then, Kazuki asked for permission to scout the area and was immediately refused. However, she didn't back down and told the captain that Amane would accompany her. Both girls left in search of a phone signal but were unable to find any. Kazuki took out a compass to help them navigate, but the rocky terrain caused it to malfunction. Realizing that climbing the mountain was not an option, they returned to their makeshift camp, disappointed. When Kazuki saw that the girl on first aid duty hadn't treated anyone yet, she argued with her and then took over. While she was threading a needle, Amane asked if she'd ever sewn anyone up before, and Kazuki said she'd only read about it. A little while later, Kazuki successfully treated all those with injuries, but Amane noticed that Kazuki's arm was injured as well. She immediately began apologizing, believing she was to blame, but Kazuki explained that she wrapped her seatbelt around her arm when the bus fell, which had caused her injury. Still, Amane kept apologizing, so Kazuki told her that she would owe her a debt for the time being. Soon, the teacher woke up, so the girls gathered around him. Kazuki then suggested they move because their food and water wouldn't last long. The team captain got pissed at this and told Kazuki that if she was so desperate to die, she could go ahead. Later on, the teacher covered the dead students, and the team captain shared tents and food for everyone. When night fell, Amane and Kazuki sat chatting outside for a while before Kazuki decided to go in. Amane remained outside for a while, wondering what would happen to them. The following morning, Amane woke up alone in the tent, so she went out to look for Kazuki in the forest. As she kept calling out her name, Kazuki emerged from the bushes and told her to keep her voice down. She explained that she'd gone to relieve herself and gather some edible plants. As she began walking away, Amane followed her and told her not to wander off again without telling her, because she'd been worried about her. Kazuki was surprised to hear this, but promised Amane that she would let her know the next time she decided to act like Dora. Later, as the other girls continued attempting to get a signal, Amane decided to help Kazuki tend to the severely injured girls. However, one of the girls pulled her aside, saying she had some advice to help her handle Kazuki if she ever got in a bad mood. She then whispered something into Amane's ear, causing the girl to blush. When Amane eventually made it to the tent, she found Kazuki disinfecting the wound of the girl who had a cut on her stomach. Seeing her, Kazuki asked her to change the towel on the other girl's head, and when Amane did, the girl thanked her. Turning her attention back to her patient, Kazuki told the girl to avoid scratching her stitches, as that would cause the wound to reopen. Afterwards, Amane and Kazuki went to a nearby stream to get water, and Amane asked whether it was a good idea for them to be working in pairs. Kazuki explained that it was, and explained that if they were working as a group, opinions would clash, some people would slack off, and things wouldn't get done. This made Amane mutter something underneath her breath, so Kazuki told her to speak up if she disagreed. Amane assured her that she didn't disagree because she knew Kazuki was always right, but Kazuki didn't like that. She told Amane that if she felt uncomfortable being paired with her, she was free to leave, but Amane denied it. Suddenly, she remembered the other girl's advice, so she told Kazuki that she'd chosen to pair with her because she was the person she liked the most out of everyone. Kazuki immediately became flustered after hearing this, but turned away, trying to act all tough and nonchalant. Amane quickly noticed it, so she began teasing him, and when Kazuki wouldn't let up, she attempted to hug her. This resulted in Kazuki falling into the water, but when Amane tried to apologize, Kazuki shushed her and told her to listen. Almost immediately, the sound of a helicopter flying overhead was heard, and the girls quickly rushed back to camp. The other girls were already trying to get the pilot's attention, but their voices couldn't be heard. As a last resort, Amane pressed the bus horn, but that still didn't work, and the helicopter flew away. The next day, the bodies of their dead teammates began to smell, so the teacher took them into the forest and buried them. Later in the day, while Amane and Kazuki were gathering herbs in the forest, Kazuki told her that she had a younger brother. She said she felt bad for him because everyone, including their parents, always compared him to her. At the mention of her parents, Amane became nostalgic and started crying, saying she wanted to go home. Kazuki hugged her and promised to get her home no matter what. On the fourth day, they started rationing their food, and that night it rained heavily, so they were forced to turn in. On the sixth day, Amane and Kazuki found the girl in charge of the food panicking in her tent. She said that one of the carrots was missing, and Kazuki speculated that someone had stolen it. However, starting a witch hunt would cause widespread panic, so, to solve the problem, she cut up all the carrots, and when she rearranged them, there were exactly 11 pieces. Amane and the girl were surprised and asked Kazuki if she was secretly a magician, but Kazuki said she wasn't. She explained that she'd moved the pieces around like a puzzle, but the girl didn't care for the details and thanked Kazuki for saving her from the team captain's wrath. On the seventh day, when Amane went to drop off water in the big tent, she witnessed the team captain getting angry at the girl with the broken leg. She refused to eat her food, and when the captain kept insisting, Kazuki told her she was acting like a dictator. She then asked her to leave, so the captain stormed off angrily, leaving Kazuki and Amane to tend to the girls. Together, they changed the first girl's bandages, and after she left, Kazuki turned to the other girl and apologized for not noticing her plight sooner. The girl pleaded with Kazuki to leave her alone, but Kazuki refused and instead asked Amane to boil some more water for her. It turned out the girl had soiled herself and was too embarrassed to tell anyone. Amane couldn't help but feel sorry for the girl, and when the girl started crying, Kazuki told her not to feel ashamed. On the ninth day, their teacher said goodbye to them and left to get help. The girls didn't really believe he would succeed, but they kept their mouths shut and wished him luck. Once he was gone, the captain ordered everyone to continue their duties, and the group dispersed. 2 days later, Kazuki discovered maggots on the wound of one of the girls, but she didn't panic and instructed Amane to wipe the other girl down. As Amane did that, the girl told her that she wanted to die, but Amane scolded her for thinking like that. She told the girl to keep pushing because she knew they would get rescued soon, so the girl vowed to repay her for taking care of her. By the 11th day, one of the girls began acting like a loony, but there was nothing anyone could do because they were all suffering from one thing or the other. The day after that, the dog belonging to one of the girls died, so Kazuki suggested that they eat it. The girls were appalled, but they didn't disagree with the suggestion because they were all starving. In the end, Kazuki was the one who did the dirty work of gutting and preparing the meat. When it was ready, the girls ate it, tears streaming down their faces as they felt a mix of emotions about their decision. 2 days later, as the girls lay on the ground in despair, their teacher returned and started celebrating. However, the girls realized that he'd failed to find a way back down and lost even more hope. That evening, the girl with the broken legs died, so the teacher took her body away and buried it. 2 more days passed, and 2 other girls died, one because of a wound infection and the other because she took her life. Those who remained began losing what was left of their sanity and began making jokes about dying. One evening, the team captain handed out some soup, saying that the teacher had caught a deer. While the others devoured the food, Amane took some to Kazuki, but the girl refused to eat it. She said it would give her a tummy ache, so Amane took the food away and didn't eat her own share. That night, Kazuki woke Amane up and told her to pack her stuff because they were leaving. Confused, Amane asked if they weren't taking the others, and Kazuki told her that the others were beyond saving. After hearing this, Amane complied with the instructions, and together they walked into the forest. However, Kazuki said she had something to show Amane first, then took her to the spot where the captain and teacher were hooking up. Before Amane could recover from that shock, the light of the moon illuminated the surroundings, and Amane screamed in shock when she noticed the body parts of her dead classmate lying nearby. It turned out there were no deer after all, and what the girls ate was their friend. Her scream alerted the crazed couple to them, so the captain ordered the teacher to get rid of them. Kazuki quickly grabbed Amane and started running, but the teacher was fast. Just when it looked like he was going to catch them, Kazuki hit him with her bag, and he passed out. They then continued running, but Amane was still in disbelief at what she'd witnessed. At some point, they ran into another girl, who asked where they were going. Amane tried to respond, but Kazuki told her not to waste her breath, and that was when she realized the others knew what they had eaten. Kazuki then grabbed Amane's hand again and pulled her away, saying they had to escape no matter what. After running for a while, Amane suddenly let go of Kazuki's hand and said that she couldn't continue running, but Kazuki managed to convince her to keep going. Unfortunately, they hadn't gone very far when Amane heard the other girls behind them and tripped over a branch. This little mishap took away the last shred of hope she had left, so she pulled out a knife and told Kazuki she was going to end things. Kazuki told her not to be foolish and said that if anyone were to stay back, it would be her. Before Amane could protest, Kazuki gave her bag to her, saying it had food in it, and also gave her a piece of paper which she said had instructions on how to get off the mountain. Amane started crying, saying she wouldn't leave Kazuki behind, but Kazuki promised her they would meet again and then pushed her to run. Amane's feet complied even though her heart didn't, and when she turned to look at Kazuki one last time, the girl was smiling even as she was being overpowered. With that image burned into her head, Amane ran for her life so that Kazuki's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. Days later, Amane was still in the forest and very hungry because she refused to eat the food Kazuki gave her. Just when she was about to give up, Kazuki and the other girls who had died first appeared to her. Amane believed they had come to take her away and started following them, but to her surprise, she found a road instead. On the other side was a cabbage field, so she rushed there and began stuffing her face with cabbage as she cried tears of joy. Sometime later, she returned to school, but her classmates questioned the fact that she was the sole survivor and began saying all sorts of nasty things. Thanks to that, Amane's condition worsened, and she began seeing a shrink. It wasn't until she met Kazuki that her guilt began to subside, and she started living again. Back in the present, she apologized to Yuji for keeping the truth from him. Yuji asked if she'd clung to him out of guilt, and she admitted it started that way. But after getting to know him, she fell in love with him. The only problem was that she didn't think she deserved to be happy with him when she was the reason his sister died. She then apologized to Yuji again and asked him to end her life so she could pay for her sins. In response, Yuji hit her head and told her not to be stupid and show it. He said if she really wanted to make up for her sins, she should spend the rest of her days at his side because he would be her reason for living. Amane asked if she could really do that, and Yuji assured her that she could. Overwhelmed, she started crying and hugged him, but Yuji allowed her because he knew she needed it. He also knew that if he hadn't given her that condition, she would continue living in guilt and would never realize that she was the only one who could save herself. When she finally calmed down, Yuji asked if she truly believed that Kazuki was dead since her head was never found. This made Amane recall the carrot trick, so she immediately became hopeful and went to find the map Kazuki had given her. Kazuki had mapped out a spot where she hid some food in case the escape plan failed, so Amane asked Yuji to go with her to check the place. The next day, they stopped in town so Amane could buy some supplies. While Yuji waited for her to return, a sus guy approached him, saying he was a fan of Amane's. Yuji wasn't comfortable with the guy's presence, and thankfully, he left before Amane returned. A few hours later, they arrived in the forest and went to the spot where Kazuki had marked on the map. Yuji used a shovel to dig up the cooler hidden there, and Amane's hopes crashed. After she opened it, she found a letter from Kazuki addressed to her and read it. Kazuki had written that everyone had died after eating a toxic soup and that Amane survived because she didn't eat the meal like the rest of them. Amane knew Kazuki had written that to make her feel better, so she continued reading. At the end of the letter, Kazuki asked Amane to find Yuji and take care of him because she knew the boy would have a hard time. Eventually, they went to the valley where the bus had crashed, and it still looked the same, except for the memorial stone. Amane then offered her respects to her dead teammates and promised them that she would turn her life around for her sake. A little while later, they returned to their truck, and as they were putting things away, Makina called Amane. However, the person on the line wasn't Makina, but the sus guy Yuji had spoken to in town. He was the father of one of the girls who died in the valley, and since Amane was the sole survivor, he blamed her for his daughter's death. At that moment, Sachi also called Yuji, so he heard everything the guy was saying. He had gone to the dorm to look for Amane, and when the girls told him she was out, he pulled a gun on them and told them to get changed. Amane told him to leave her friends alone, but the guy said that if she didn't return, he would get rid of them. He made them all surrender their phones, but Michiru didn't want to, so he shot at the window to scare her. Sachi then took the phone from Michiru and placed it in the bag, so the man told Amane to hurry back. After he hung up, Amane turned to Yuji, and he assured her that everything would be fine, but he didn't hang up his phone so that he could keep tabs on the situation. On the drive back, he called Julia and requested assistance because involving the police would reveal that Yumeko was alive. After he got off the phone with Julia, Amane asked Yuji who he really was, but he shushed her so he could listen to what the man was saying. The man said that if his daughter had lived, she would have attended a nice school and made so many friends. Yumiko asked if he truly thought that hurting Amane would make up for his loss, and he told her that she would never understand his loss. Yumiko assured him that she would, since she'd witnessed her father losing his mind, but the man was done listening to her. He walked over to the window to see if Amane had arrived and ended up spotting Julia's men. Immediately, he opened fire on them, and swore that he would get rid of anyone who attempted to get in his way. A little while later, Amane and Yuji arrived, and when she noticed the uniforms the men were wearing, the truth of who Yuji was dawned on her. However, she couldn't dwell on it because Yuji called her over to discuss the plan. Julia explained that the room the man had the girls in was on the 3rd floor, and since there were no tall buildings around, they couldn't snipe him. Yuji said they could use the lighthouse, but Julia said he was being too ambitious. Yuji assured her that, with his skills, it would be a walk in the park and asked them to trust him. Julia then looked at the school layout again and said that if they could lure the guy to the boys' bathroom, Yuji would get a better shot. Yuji told her to leave it to him, and a little while later, the lighthouse light started blinking. When Makina noticed it, she realized it was Morse code and that Yuji wanted her to go to the boys' bathroom and break the last urinal. Makina didn't understand why he wanted her to do that, but she decided to obey and started acting like her organs were about to pop out. The man told her to hold it in, but Makina told him that if he didn't want to see things, he would let her go to the bathroom. When he agreed, Michiru insisted on being taken along because she needed to pee. As soon as they left the classroom, Sachi spoke up and informed Yuji, so he turned to the bathroom. Michiru nearly ruined the plan when she wanted to use the girls' bathroom, but Makina covered her mouth and forced her inside. Once there, the younger girl began wondering how she'd break the urinal, but the man saved her the trouble. He hit her with the butt of his gun, causing her to bump into Michiru, who fell forward and broke the urinal with her head. Makina was so grateful for Michiru's head, and when Yuji saw that the job was done, he alerted Julia. Soon, the guy called Amane told her that if she didn't come, he would shoot the girls. Left with no choice, Amane said she was on her way, but before she left, Yuji told her to take some water with her and make sure that the guy drank it. Amane did as she was told, and the man happily drank all the water because he was actually thirsty. He also made Amane change into her school uniform, and once she was tied up, he began yapping. He blamed Amane for his daughter's death and told her to choose between saving herself and saving her friends. Amane said she was willing to die as long as her friends lived, so the man hit her in the face with the butt of his gun and said he wouldn't let her die that easily. He then pulled her up by her hair and threw her to the front of the class, prompting the others to protest. The man told them that they were all good friends, but didn't stop stomping on Amane like she was a lifeless doll. Eventually, he went from being angry with her to being excited by her body, so he grabbed her and took her to the bathroom. At this point, Sachi's phone had died, so that they couldn't inform Yuji about the new development. Fortunately, the guy locked Amane in a stall so he could relieve himself, and as soon as he came into range, Yuji shot him. The man was so shocked when the bullet pierced his shoulder that he fell and started screaming in pain. Amane then freed herself and, after kicking the door open, she picked up the gun and ran away. Yuji then informed Julia that the target had been hit, so she ordered her men to go in and get the man. As he was dragged away, Amane untied her friends and apologized for putting them in danger, but they told her it wasn't her fault. Soon after, Yuji arrived, and the girls happily welcomed him. Do you think Kazuki could still be alive? If you enjoyed this video, comment more. Also, check out this next video.